Just Me, a place to be me, where you get to experience life. 'Cause life is a journey, not a guided tour. If you want the rainbow, you have to go through the rain.
Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back to another episode of Just Me Podcast. I'm your host, Tracy, and I'm going to be diving in some more talk on March Madness and mental health behind the scene. On last week, we had our first episode where we had the privilege to interview two mental health clinicians, Miss Naya and Miss Aaliyah, and they also are former athletes on the high school and collegiate level, and they shared some of their setbacks and struggles of what it felt like for them on and off the court. So this week we're going to continue the conversation, and we're going to focus on the balancing act, the court to classroom aspect, and then also how that affects our student athletes. So, student athletes carry a unique set of challenges. They are expected to perform at high levels, both in their sport and in the classroom, often with very little time to just breathe. Think about it. How many hours a day does your child or your student, or even you as an athlete, spend juggling practice, schoolwork, and everything in between? And at what cost? We've heard stories from athletes about how exhausting this can be. Some thrive under pressure while others start to crumble. If you remember when Simone Biles during the Olympics, and she showed her struggles with mental health and the pressures and everything that was on her, and the big decision that she made to even step back because she prioritized her mental health. And the truth is, balancing academics and sports isn't just about discipline and hard work. It's about mental health, about knowing when to push and when to rest, and about understanding that performance isn't the only thing that defines you. One area is stress and time. Time is one of the biggest challenges student or athletes face. Between early morning workouts, classes, afternoon practices, and late night homework, where does the time go? And more importantly, where is the time to rest? Studies show that about 30% of student athletes report feeling overwhelmed by their commitments. That's nearly 1 in 3. Let's pause here and think about the young athletes you know. Maybe it's your child, your grandchild, your niece, your nephew, a neighbor, a student in your class, or even yourself. When was the last time they or you felt truly rested? High stress and lack of rest don't just lead to exhaustion, they can impact academic performance, emotional well being, and even long term mental health. When we overload schedules without building in time for recovery, we're setting students, athletes up for burnout, anxiety, and even depression. So, what do we do? Because the solution isn't just work harder or manage time better. The solution is intentional balance, building routine that prioritize not just productivity, but well-being as well. Here's where structure becomes a game changer. A simple, consistent routine that includes time for practice, time for study, time for rest, and time for self-care. That's 4 times. I'm going to say it one more time. Time for practice, time for study, time for rest, and time for self care can make all the difference. But self care isn't just an extra thing to do, it has to be as non negotiable as training. And if you listen to the last episode, Miss Naya brought out a really, really good point about self-care. Self-care is a necessity. It's not an extra expense. It's not something we might do or should do or maybe I'm going to do. It is a necessity. It should be non-negotiable. That's why having a support system is crucial. Parents, coaches, teachers, aunties, uncles, brothers, sisters, we all play a role in making sure student athletes feel supported. And it starts with a simple but often overlooked action, simply asking how they are really doing. Not just how was practice or did you finish your homework, but really checking in. How are you feeling? Are you managing okay? Simple. Ask the question, how are you feeling? Are you managing okay? And we often struggle with trying to ask people those questions because it might seem a little personal. But again, you want to make sure as a support system that you're checking in to help them. How are you feeling? Are you managing okay? Let's be honest. How often do we stop and ask those questions? How often do we make space for the real answer? Because you know you can get, nah, I'm okay. And we keep it moving. But then we look at them and we see the nonverbals that their mouth might say one thing, but their actions speak another. One of the biggest risks for student athletes is burnout, that feeling of complete exhaustion where motivation disappears and even the things they once loved feel like a burden. But here's something to consider. A major factor in burnout isn't just overtraining, it's identity. If a student only sees themselves as an athlete, any setback, any setback, any injury, big or small, a bad game, or even just an off day can feel like a personal failure. And again, in our last episode, I know Miss Aaliyah mentioned that she cried at the end of the game because she felt that it was her fault, that she lost the game because someone on the other team, a buzzer beater, hit a winning shot because they was winning. I was there. But this is how she felt. So that's why it's so important to encourage interests outside of sports, like hobbies, friendships, other skills. These all help create a balanced identity. Because at the end of the day, an athlete is more than their performance, more than their stats, and more than any wins and any losses. So if you're an athlete listening right now, ask yourself, who am I beyond my sport? If your sport disappeared tomorrow, what would be left? I'm going to say that one more again. If you're an athlete listening right now, ask yourself, who am I beyond my sport? If my sport disappeared tomorrow, what would be left? So what's now? So if you're a student athlete, a parent, a coach, how do you take this conversation and turn it into action? First, balance is key. Academic success and athletic performance should not come at the cost of mental health. That's a no-no. Balance is key. Number two, Time management matters, but so does rest. Burnout doesn't just happen, it builds over time when self-care is neglected. Prioritize that self-care. Number 3, support systems are powerful. Open conversations, checking in, and encouraging balance can change the game for student athletes. You want a game changer? Support system. Make sure you're very involved as a person on someone's support system agenda. And number 4, athletes are more than their sports. Encourage identity beyond competition. It's essential for long-term well-being. And finally, if you're struggling with these pressures, know that you're not alone. Reach out, talk to someone, and remember that your worth is not measured by wins, grades, or how much you can handle at once. So thanks for spending time with Just Me Podcast on today. Let's keep this conversation going. Until next week, take care, stay balanced, and remember your mental health matters just as much as your performance.
Thank you so much for listening to Just Me Therapy podcast. If you are seeking further one-on-one diagnoses, interventions, and treatment plans, please consider scheduling an appointment with an individual counselor at Journeys Counseling Center, located in Greensboro, North Carolina. Journeys can be reached at 336-294-1349. The mission of Just Me Therapy podcast is to use authentic conversations to uplift one's mind, body, and soul. The goal of Just Me Therapy is to offer affordable education and insight to individuals who experience financial barriers to accessing individualized behavioral health care services. With that being said, the information, including opinions, advice, and recommendations discussed in this podcast, are intended for individual, informational, and educational purposes only. Such information is not intended to substitute the recommendations of your own licensed therapist or healthcare professional. Although we are licensed behavioral health professionals, we are not your licensed behavioral health professional. As a result, the advice mentioned on this podcast should not replace the recommendations offered by your own qualified health professional.